We return to our series on the state of hurricane recovery efforts in Houston 5 months after Hurricane Harvey. In our first reports, we profiled 2 sets of homeowners who are still trying to get their lives back to normal. In his final report on life after the storm, Sreenivasan explores what changes leaders say are needed to avoid another disaster and who should pay for them.
In Northeast Houston, Jackie White and her husband Michael are repairing their home, which flooded during Harvey. This is the second time they've gone through all of this, despite being outside the federally designated floodplain. Jackie's holding out hope that the government will buy her out so she can move someplace safer.
I have to live with it until I can get it together. Get it together, find someplace else to go. But that would be a big blessing.
All right, show me your house.
Okay. It's a mess.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in the southwest neighborhood of Meyerland, Kathleen and Nat Piccini flooded as well.
This was our den. It had this wonderful wood paneling in here.
They love their mid-century home, but with Kathleen fighting breast cancer, they've decided to take their insurance payout and sell.
So our contract currently is with the builder who will come in and tear it down and build a $1 million+ house.
That new house would be elevated to keep it from flooding.
So this is a house that looks like it's
in the process of being lifted.
We drove around the Piccini's neighborhood, where many homes are now for sale, with architect Brett Seymour. He designs homes in this area. In fact, he says he won't even take on clients unless they're thinking long-term.
Yeah. This house has been like this for a while because it was flooded during, I think, the tax day flood. I've been in Houston since '95, and it's flooded so many times. It's getting worse and worse every year. The past 3 years, we've had 3 severe floods. Our tax day flood, Memorial Day flood, and then Harvey. And Harvey has just been the one that people have realized, we got to wake up and do something about this. We built about 16 inches above the base flood elevation with this house.
The city and county say they are enacting building codes that will require new homes to be elevated above not the 100, but the 500-year floodplain. And yet, elevating old homes is expensive, even with a federal subsidy. So in some cases, it will mean buying out old homes like Jackie White's, says Harris County Executive Ed Emmett.
Like it or not, we cannot keep paying people to rebuild in places where they're going to keep flooding.
Buyouts take money. The county will move forward with a large bond issue, and $5 billion from the Department of Housing and Urban Development is on the way, some of which will go towards that.
There's been a huge disconnect, I think, between the builder of these developments and the home buyer.
Texas A&M professor Sam Brody says better information will help drive market changes moving forward. Using FEMA data on homes that have flooded before, he created Buyers Beware. So when people are looking to buy a home in Houston or Galveston, they can know the flood risk too.
We talked to a woman this morning. She's heading back to a house that's kind of being, band-aided together. If she had her choice, she wouldn't go back there. She has survived Allison. She doesn't want another Harvey, right? But she's like, I don't have the money to move anywhere else.
And I hear stories like that every week. And Buyers Beware was created in response to people coming and saying, I wish I knew, I'm trapped, I'll never be bought out, because there's so many people who want to be bought out.
In addition to moving people out of harm's way, Brody says there are many structural and large-scale changes needed, and that after Harvey, now is the time to push for them.
I was here for Tropical Storm Allison, which had similar impacts. And at that point they said, this will never happen again. That was in 2001. 16 years later, it happened again, this time more widespread. I think it's a real window of opportunity to think about meaningful change.
Houston is known as the Bayou City. It was built in a low-lying area only about an hour from the Gulf of Mexico. Many of its streets were built to convey stormwater into the bayous, which snake throughout the city. Those, in turn, take water from the streets out to the Gulf. Harvey was so catastrophic not because of its winds, but because it dumped more than 50 inches of rain on this region. The flood control measures were simply overwhelmed. The 2 reservoirs, the Barker and Addicks, which were built in the 1940s and lie in the west, look like fields on a dry January day. Harvey filled them to the brim, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which controls them, feared a breach, so they opened their floodgates into Buffalo Bayou, flooding tens of thousands of additional homes.
We don't want to be standing in the same place when the next storm comes.
Mayor Sylvester Turner and others are calling for a third reservoir to be built in the northwest part of the city, the continued widening of the bayous to help carry more water to the Gulf, and in the Gulf, the construction of a coastal spine, a massive gate that would protect the region during a storm surge.
One thing we do know, the rains will continue to fall, and the odds are there will be flooding in 18, 19, and 20. So we have to be stronger, and we have to be more resilient. Otherwise, just putting people back in their homes the very way they were before is just funding for failure.
But of course, these ideas will take time, political will, and money. The state of Texas has an $11 billion rainy day fund that Turner and Emmett want to tap into, but the state legislature won't return to session until 2019. Then there's an $81 billion funding package making its way through Congress. The House has passed it, but the Senate has yet to vote on it. In a year that held the most expensive natural disasters on record, wildfires in California, hurricanes in Florida and Puerto Rico, that money will have to be shared between all of the affected areas.
We need to move with the greatest degree of urgency. The state has indicated repeatedly that they're probably not going to come back into session until 2019. We're waiting on the feds.
So what's the holdup? I mean, why? I mean, you're in a position of power. You've got members of Congress in the majority. You've got a White House in the majority.
Well, today it is illegal for me as a member of Congress and appropriator to target the money to a geographically specific project.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take...
U.S. Representative John Culberson represents Houston and says because of a House ban on earmarks, he cannot send money directly to these flood mitigation projects to get them moving quickly.
That makes no sense. It handicaps me as their representative, and it prevents me from front-loading the funding. By front-loading the funding, it expedites everything. By cutting the permitting time, you give the local authorities the ability to build these things much more rapidly. If they've got the cash on hand to get it done, they'll get it done in record time, and that's what I'm focused on.
President Trump has said he supports bringing earmarks back, but a bipartisan bill now moving through the Senate would permanently ban them. In the meantime, with the help of federal funds, people like Jackie White are returning to their homes, resigned to the fact that they may go through all of this again.
I have no control. This is home, and I would have to just basically do the same thing I'm doing now, is plead my case and wish to get help.
The question Brody and others ask is whether the nation continues to pay for disaster recovery after a storm or for flood mitigation before one, saving both money and lives.
Many would say that we're setting ourselves up in Houston and Miami and Chicago for continuing chronic, repetitive flood losses. As the conditions change, it's just going to get worse unless we really step back and start rethinking the way we measure and conceptualize risk.
Reporting from Houston, I'm Sreenivasan for the PBS NewsHour.